And one of them is like Nescafe double, which I don't think counts. So that one doesn't count, so I'm still on 4. There are so many more women in cycling now, certainly than when I started out. I suffered a lot of unwanted attention. I didn't know for most of my life that anxiety was what I had. I didn't realize that there was a name for this feeling that I woke up with every day. I did the Étape de Tour, and that wasn't 10 times braver, that was maybe 10 times stupider. And in the second big descent of the day, I was actually able to do that. I was singing to myself down that mountain. I'm gonna get emotional just thinking about it. I was sort of fighting demons. Having a bike was a big part of my childhood. What I do remember is cycling around outside our childhood home, trying tricks. Yeah. So I would stand up on the crossbar. I'd do like one leg behind. I would sort of try to balance on my arms and kick my legs up behind me. I was trying to almost skate the bike at one stage with both hands and the crossbar, and I absolutely loved doing that, and I thought I was the bee's knees. It was and I must have been maybe only about 10 or 11, until I fell off once, and I was like, oh, that's not so much fun. I'm not going to do that anymore. And that was the end of my tricks cycling career. It was a big part of my life because I lived in the countryside. And I remember in the summer, me and my 2 cousins, one was a year younger than me, one 2 years younger than me, Maeve and Maria, and we lived like in a sort of a triangle shape, I guess, across the countryside. And we would go out on the bikes in the summer all day long. I remember Maeve's brakes being really squeaky and be going down this one hill towards her house, and me and Maria would be laughing at the front as Maeve was coming down the back going, "Aah!" And that sound of her squeaking brakes is such a strong part of my childhood memory. So bikes for me, genuinely as a kid, they just represent joy, fun, connection, movement, freedom, everything that I love about cycling. I think because I'm from the countryside, there wasn't much to do. And so there was an athletics club that started in our village. I'd done Irish dancing and I played the violin. I thought, okay, well, I'll give athletics a go. I didn't care what my discipline was. I just wanted to be with my friends and use my energy. And then randomly discovered that I was really good at the triple jump. And so that became my thing. And yeah, I ended up being on the Northern Ireland athletics squad and competed for Northern Ireland. I beat Canada single-handedly, I like to say. That became my dream. I'd like trained 5-6 days a week and wanted to be an Olympian, which never happened, but that was the love of competitive sport for me, and that's where it came from. Well, I stopped triple jump at about 18, 19, because I was junior champion and we had no triple jump coaches. So there was no one who was able to take me to the next level. So when I got injured in my first year of training through university, I kind of thought, well, I'm going to pack that in then, because I had no goal to train towards, because being a 400-meter runner was never something I wanted to do. So I guess I stopped because the joy went out of it, the fun went out of it. And that's when I let sports slide a little bit, you know. But I always really wanted to be a journalist. And I knew that law was a good training ground for anything cerebral, which I found journalism to be. And so I did a postgrad in journalism as soon as I finished my law with French degree and moved to Edinburgh, studied that there. And then that was the start of my journey into journalism, and fell in love with that whole world. As I was going through this whole period of my life, sport was my counterbalance. It was always my counterbalance. I would go out and have fun, you know, party into the wee small hours like a lot of young professionals or a lot of students. When I lived in France, I would run home from the city centre to the halls of residence just as a way, A, to get there faster. And I thought, well, this will keep me fit, and I'm a bit drunk, so I won't notice that I'm doing some training at the same time. I was a news journalist working in London after I was the Ireland correspondent. I was starting to be disillusioned by it all and by the news world in general. My boss went to Beijing for the Olympic Games and came back and decided that we needed an Olympics correspondent. I'd never thought of being a sports broadcaster, never. In news broadcasting, sport is seen as being a bit lower. It's less intelligent, it's less cerebral. But I thought, well, Olympics I could do, because, you know, track and field is obviously a big element of Olympic coverage, but I get to do finance and politics and economics and, you know, a bit of travel travel as well. So I applied for that and got that job. So I went to a World Cup, and Sir Chris Hoy was one of the first people that I met in this new role. But getting to meet him in person, I was so blown away by this titan of a human who was also just a beautiful person. So I concentrated on cycling for a little bit, and then we heard the rumour that Team Sky were going to start a team. The boss, who was a massive cycling fan at the time, the head of news, John Riley, called me in and said, I want you to keep across this for us. My first gig for this part of my professional career was going out to Tuscany to report on the exclusive news that this new Team Sky were going to sign Ben Swift and Geraint Thomas. And then I got to go to the Giro d'Italia, Team Sky's first Grand Tour, and I was in. I just was so blown away by the beauty and joy and celebration of the fans, and the Tifosi in particular are just exceptional with that. But I also realized that this was a sport that was going to satisfy a bit of my cerebral craving, because it's not as straightforward as it looks. And I was fascinated by this whole concept of having one leader and the rest of the team, all these domestiques working in service of that one leader, but their whole job will be a success if they do something that is completely unseen. And I found that a really beautiful microcosm of humanity, really. And so that was it. I was completely hooked with cycling and got deeper and deeper, and just decided from then on I wanted my professional career to be built around cycling. There are so many more women in cycling now, certainly than when I started out. Initially, in the Tour de France press room, there was me and my producer Leah, and we were the only two women in that whole press room. Both of us do not shy away from our femininity. And so we were wearing dresses and heels. I suffered a lot of unwanted attention, and I've talked about that elsewhere. But the thing is, A, people remembered me, and so it was very easy to get someone's attention because you weren't blending in with everybody else. But B, I was able to use a much more traditionally feminine way of questioning. So I wasn't coming at the riders or the coaches with a really hard line of binary questioning, but rather trying to find the human behind it. And that was unusual. It's much more common now in sports reporting and sports broadcasting, desperate to find the tearjerker of a story. But I was just doing that naturally because I wanted to know, because I was fascinated by this sport that I couldn't understand. What are you doing? What do you mean you work all day for somebody else? What do you mean you've been in this for 10 years, you've never won a bike race? And that's successful. Wow. Tell me about it. And I had the freedom to ask those questions in a way that I don't think guys would have done. So I use it to my advantage, because you've got to do one of the two. You've got to either shy away from it and try to be like everybody else. So you think, no, I'm here as a woman. What are we going to make of that? For me, anxiety was always, I would wake up in the morning and I would feel a tightness in my chest and a churning in my gut. And I would find something to latch onto this feeling. And then I would think, okay, that's what it is. But the problem was, it didn't make the anxiety go away. And the thing that wasn't that big a deal anyway now became much bigger, because I decided that that's what I was afraid of. I would say that growing up in a bloody conflict in Northern Ireland in the Troubles was probably quite a big factor of this. And the reason I say that is because I've been looking into studies after the end of the Troubles, and we still in Northern Ireland have a higher rate of antidepressant and anxiety medication use than anywhere else in Europe. This fear became so generalized that we forgot to attach it to anything. And so when the source of the fear went away, we were still scared. And that's what we live in a lot of our modern life. And so this generalized fear has spread throughout society in a way that we've not even recognized. This fear of falling behind, a fear of not being good enough, a fear of missing out, a fear of failure, a fear of success even. And we don't realize that they're not the fears that belong to us. So even people who don't have anxiety will experience something of what I've lived with all my life. I'm laughing to myself when we talk about anxiety, because I credit myself with having a bit of intelligence and a bit of self-awareness. And yet, I didn't know for most of my life that anxiety was what I had. I didn't realize that there was a name for this feeling that I woke up with every day. And I also just assumed that I was a little bit misplaced in the world in a way. I couldn't feel the ease that everyone around me seemed to feel. I couldn't feel this comfort in my own existence that other people seem to have naturally. But I didn't realize that any of that was anxiety for a long, long time. And so actually anxiety has been a massive help in my life because it's been my fuel, because I assumed that this feeling would go away if I achieved. So that's what drove me through law when I didn't want to study law. It drove me through newsrooms that were elitist and very Oxbridge and very sexist and patronizing. But it meant that I had this work ethic that no one could ever take away from me because I was constantly driven. What it also meant, however, not realizing I had anxiety, was that I was masking it for years with alcohol. And that's what makes me really sad when I look back now and realize that if I'd only known what it was, I wouldn't have needed to run from it so hard. So that's what was really difficult and quite chaotic, really, until life sort of took over and I couldn't keep masking it with alcohol because I became a mother and something had to change. And I knew I wanted to stay driven, and I knew I wanted to work really hard, and I knew I wanted to be a really good mum. And the only thing I could really get rid of was the alcohol. The hardest bit was realizing, even when the alcohol had gone, the reason I was drinking was still there. And still I didn't know this was anxiety. But in that space, I knew I had to find something else to fill that hole. And if I'm not going to be spending my evenings drinking, I have to find something else to do. I'm going to be bored and I'm going to get into trouble with something else. And so I turned to meditation because I thought I need to find some sort of a peace from within. I need to stop relying on external factors to grant me that validity or grant me permission to find peace. Through that whole journey, I've realized where anxiety sits quite comfortably now within my own existence. It's there, but it doesn't scare me anymore. It just forces me to slow down sometimes, to show myself more kindness, more patience, more love. So it was all a beautiful journey, but it was a hard path to get here. I created 10 Times Braver from this place of anxiety, almost as a place of rebellion from it. And 10 Times Braver as a project, as a passion, as an entity came about from a conversation that I had with a friend of a friend. We were talking about different directions that you can have in life. And I was at a bit of a crossroads in my life. And Taylor said to me, well, it's easy really. What would you do if you were 10 times braver? I thought, that's a wonderful way to frame this question, but back up a minute. I'm going to have to unpack this because are you telling me I've got more authority over my life and more agency if I'm a bit braver? Because that also means I have to look at all the obstacles that I've placed in my way because I'm afraid of what lies on the other side. And all I have to do is access my bravery. What would I do if I were 10 times braver? Well, hang on a minute. And it opened up this whole new way of thinking for me that's led me into this whole journey of discovery.
Being 10 times braver,
Yeah.
you entered the Étape de Tour and you had a relationship with the bike again.
Uh-huh.
So
yeah, I did the Étape de Tour, and that wasn't 10 times braver. That was maybe 10 times stupider. I was invited to enter the Étape of the Tour de France Femmes last year, and that's really relevant because I would never have considered the Étape of the men's race. I don't need to. But when I realized that they were doing the first ever Étape for the Tour de France Femmes, then I'm like, I can't not do that. I'm all in. I'm not great at setting small challenges is my problem. And so once I set the challenge, I knew that I would have to do it, but it was way too much. It was too much of a challenge in such a short space of time, and it was pouring with rain, and I kind of enjoyed the fans by the side of the road, but I was also like, please just leave me alone. No more cowbells. I don't need it anymore. This is just too painful. Halfway through the day, ironically on a descent, I finally started to enjoy it. Danny and Matt have been coaching me running up to this, and she had been trying to help me to just let go of the brakes. And in the second big descent of the day, I was actually able to do that. And oh, the sweet, sweet joy of that descent was like nothing else. The freedom. I was singing to myself down that mountain. I had all of, I'm going to get emotional just thinking about it. I was sort of fighting demons. On that descent,